The Legend of Zelda is far and away one of my favorite video game series of all time, and a quick look at some of my videos and favorites lists can attest to that. I adore Zelda. I love the worlds, the atmosphere, the rich mythos and lore, the themes, the characters, the fun and whimsy. But I think that the element that got me properly hooked initially was how wonderfully it immerses you in a classic adventure. I have so many wonderful and cozy memories of playing many of the games curled up in bed or on the sofa with snow gently falling outside, and combining that with the epic journey that these games take you on, it all made me associate the Zelda series with a warmth that I tend to reserve for a lot of my other favorite titles, a lot of which are quite wholesome and comforting, ones like Animal Crossing, Pokemon, or Paper Mario. But in the past decade or so, I've slowly come to the realization that a good portion of the entries in the Zelda series are in large part tragedies of some form. And while I do think that there are notes of this in a lot of the entries, please be aware that I'm speaking primarily in this video of the child timeline for the Hero of Time, encapsulating Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess, but not necessarily in the way that you might expect. In all honesty, it's been a gradual process for my adult self to reconcile the idea that these games are, in some way, tragedies that chronicle the sacrifice necessary to save a kingdom, with the ones most hurt in the process often being those tasked with saving it. It's an uncomfortable idea to say the least, one that my young child self blissfully overlooked in favor of simply getting lost in these worlds. But to be clear, this is a positive change for me and my relationship with the series. It heightens my appreciation for the depth and richness of the writing, and it doesn't lessen Zelda for me nor change the soul or spirit of it, as the games are still so fun and full of life and all of that remains unchanged. But it does add a layer of melancholy to them, and it does fill me with a strange sadness when I think of them. Let's get into specifics, starting with Ocarina of Time, and most specifically, the tragic tale of the protagonist of that game, the Hero of Time. The haunting depths of this boy's lamentable journey have been incredibly well documented at this point in time in videos that I'll provide in the description for reference and context, and he is without doubt one of the most tragic characters I've ever seen personally. Here we have a youth who receives a call to action as something of a chosen one, the one whom Hyrule pins its hopes and survival on in the face of overwhelming evil power personified by Ganondorf. This boy then experiences not only trial after life-threatening trial, but the horror of causing the doom of a world due to opening the sacred realm and letting Ganondorf run amok. This isn't necessarily his world, as he could take multiple steps to ensure that this doesn't come to pass, but nonetheless, he is culpable due to being strapped with responsibility a literal child should never bear, and he is launched into saving this doomed future without receiving any positive acknowledgement or warmth for doing so. And in so doing, he quite literally loses his entire youth through aging into an adult out of necessity and putting his life on the line once more to an even greater degree in the decaying shell of a dead-end world, to save it and ensure that this terror does not come to pass, all before returning to his child body after having lost his childhood. He's saved Hyrule, but it isn't his shard nor his world, so not a soul cares for this. And in addition, through this he would then lose all his connections formed during that time. They aren't literally gone, but only he can remember and acknowledge them, and there is a specific sort of lonely agony to being the only one able to remember certain events and connections. He was irrevocably changed. Harrowed by his experiences, he lost the chance to be a normal kid, and that was taken from him. All of this sacrificed for the sake of saving the kingdom. The world was saved, but it wasn't even his world, and the Hero of Time was irreversibly changed and damaged psychologically, isolated through not being able to see the world the same way that everyone else did. And most importantly, in terms of highlighting this loneliness, he lost the one being that he went through all of it with, who shared his experience. His partner, Navi, a connection that grounded him and gave him a sense of place and belonging. As a result, he then went on a journey to find that which he had lost at the end of Ocarina of Time, specifically Navi, leading into Majora's Mask. In this story, the hero of time finds himself in a sorrowful, cyclical land full of faces that he recognizes yet does not know, looping horrific doom onto itself, and the only way for him to save this world is through reaching through and taking the hand of a being just as lonely as him, the childlike Skull Kid. The Land of Termina plays on Link's psychology and subconscious, demonstrating how he feels both kinship and revulsion towards the innocence of Skull Kid that is exploited with darkness, while subtly showing through subtext that he very likely harbors resentment for his own self, both in child and adult form, along with hating his culpability in causing his own misery. Majora's Mask covers the discrepancies and conflations between heroism and adulthood and how it applies to the hero of time. It dwells on life and death, and it reflects a warped image of the hero's mentality back at him. Once again, here he experienced all manner of tragedy and doom, but as the one with the task of resetting time, only he was able to remember it all, accentuating this loneliness. He made immense connections and there was respite, a glimmer of hope offered to him through the experience, but once his time was done and he had saved another land, off he went again, in search of what he was looking for in the first place. This Link is severely damaged, one could argue beyond repair. He finds himself incapable of seeing the worth in his exploits, the meaning of his legacy. He loses valuable connections and a great portion of his life and finds himself in a world indifferent to his struggles. There is resentment to his quest, his self, and the idea of what it means to be both an adult and a hero, and the breakthrough to his struggle involves being able to see that his lonely misery is comprised of joy and connections that truly mean something of value to him, even if he cannot see it and even if it feels like none of this was worth it. And as he moves on at the end of Majora's Mask, that is something we hope for him to be able to do. Now, I'd like to think that Link reconciled some things and found a way to attribute meaning and worth to his lonely agony. Given the bits of light that he obtains in the conclusion to Majora's Mask, I'd like to think that he finds a semblance of peace in some of the aspects of his life that haunted him. Though not confirmed, the implication that Skull Kid ultimately followed his friend through the ages as his sole companion certainly helps with that. But as we see in Twilight Princess, he is never wholly satisfied, never properly fulfilled due to the inhuman disgrace that his youth became for the sake of a distant world. In large part, he lived a regrettable existence, and that is shown through him not being able to pass on after his death through becoming the hero's shade. Now, it could be argued that the only thing that has him clinging on to existence in this husk-like, spirit form is his desire to pass on his teachings, and that is part of it, but I genuinely think that this form proves that he never really found peace. It just seems a bit strange to me that a simple desire to pass on his techniques and legacy would be the only thing approaching a regret that would lead to him resembling a genuine Stalfos after death and clinging on to the world of the living. In this setting, only deeply rooted, serious, restless regrets that leave one unable to accept death cause one to supersede it, and if you add that to Hyrule Historia's claim that he deeply lamented not being remembered for his deeds as a hero, the hero of time is incredibly sorrowful. He is damaged and did not find the peace that he sought after death. However, he finds his descendant in Twilight Princess's Link, the hero of Twilight, and sees much promise and hope in him, enough to find himself filled with hope at the prospect of passing on his teachings to him to help save Hyrule in this era. Doing so helps him relieve his burdens and helps him to take solace in his legacy, and so in this way, his story ends with an ascent. The hero of time feels like a curse of a human being. His life is lost and forgotten to the ages, and yet he finds a reprieve and a hope through passing on his experiences, duty, and legacy to the hero of Twilight, hoping that he can ultimately live in the way that the hero of time could not, to save the land but to also be properly fulfilled through his journey and what was passed on to him, physically and spiritually. And things work out. By the end of Twilight Princess, we save the land and defeat Ganondorf, and it's one of the happiest endings to a Zelda game. But is it really? Or is it just hiding underneath a veneer of joviality until the final scenes? As I'm sure I don't need to remind us all, Midna, in her beautiful full form, leaves Link and Hyrule at the end of the story. She shatters the mirror of Twilight so that light and dark will never meet again simply because of how immense the risks are. Of course, there is so much evidence for why light and dark can cooperate and work well together, with Midna and Link's beautiful relationship being a great example, but all it takes is an evil heart and some power and dark ambition and both worlds can become as torrential as they did in the story. So as agonizing as it is, Midna believes that she must destroy it and the two partners are forever separated. It's a tragic ending that I find strangely fulfilling in its own way, and I've always thought of it as very powerful. But it was only recently while watching a YouTuber named Mapokalops playing through the game for the first time where I realized how this ending fit into the role of the hero of Hyrule and his curse of strength throughout the series. In his playthrough, which I will link in the description, he makes a great point about how the finale of the story seems to leap into and recontextualize previous information and visuals. In the ending of Twilight Princess, the game presents a couple of quick scenes after Midna leaves to the Twilight Realm, with the penultimate one showing Link riding off on Epona and leaving the Ordon region to some unknown destination. It's the last time we see Link in the game. We then see the united Triforce, and the story ends. But from there, the game loops back into the familiar title screen cinematic, one of the greatest of all time by my reckoning. And what's brilliant about this is that it feels like it could be a continuation of the near final scene that we see in the game. In the title screen cinematic, we see Link riding on Epona across the vast, empty landscape of Hyrule Fields, which obviously connects to the Ordon province that we saw Link leaving from. The camera leaves him for a moment and then we return to him in his wolf form, howling mournfully. Without the context of the ending, this is just a hauntingly beautiful tone setter. But with it, I think it can be interpreted that this is directed towards the gaping hole in his heart that Midna used to fill, as he calls out for his lost partner who is not present at all here. It's a familiar premise. Notably, the sun is setting, and the hour of twilight is at hand. And what did we learn in one of the very first lines of the game? That this is whispered to be the only time when their world intersects with ours, where the worlds of light and shadow touch. In other words, this is the only glimmer of hope for Link to see Midna after her shattering the mirror, the faintest chance that he can find her. So he searches her out, likely in futility, as lonely as the hero of time. Now, the chronology and logistics here don't quite make perfect sense if you stop and think about it for a second. For instance, if this is Link grieving his lost partner after the story, why is Hyrule Castle covered in twilight again? How would he even be able to turn into a wolf when Midna likely has the Shadow Crystal? So yeah, I'm not trying to say that this is literally what happens after Link leaves Ordon Village at the end of the game. It doesn't make logical sense. But I do think that it makes symbolic, emotional, and thematic sense regarding Link's mentality at the end of the story. And I think the caged castle can be representative of the stagnant cycles of loneliness that the hero of Hyrule seems cursed to have across multiple iterations. Again, primarily referring to the Ocarina, Majora, and Twilight games. But just as the original Hero of Time was left forlorn through losing Navi, despite his best efforts to right that path through Twilight Princess's Link, the latter is left in a similar position, with both of them having saved their land yet feeling desolate and unsettled in their former home. It feels like something of a curse of loneliness, the curse of Link. A youth who has expectations and lives hoisted on him, who shoulders them without doubt, who displays such courage, but who, in this chronology at least, is left lonely and anguished and broken, with a hole in his life. And to me, the wolf form in Twilight Princess is representative in this way of the primal urge inside our hero that cries out in grief at this role thrust upon him. And it's an expression of the fact that maybe sad or bittersweet endings are inevitable, and the search for that which is lost may be pointless. Yet, there is an urge to search nonetheless. This thematic throughline shows that any story facing similar calamity requires a hero like this, but that hero in the quest to saving all will lose something that cannot be brought back. Sometimes in stories and in life, things don't end up tied in a bow. Sometimes things end in an unsatisfying way, and sometimes we yearn aimlessly. This is perhaps something that the hero of time wasn't able to realize. Perhaps he had a need to have things conclude satisfyingly, to have no regrets about anything, and to not feel a need to search. But sometimes we have to accept that life can be unkind, that it can leave us wandering and wondering and searching forever. Yet, that does not mean that we should view this as torment or give up. It's unfriendly, but so honest. And I adore that melancholy and think it fits beautifully with the series as a whole, but specifically with the spirit of these 3 games. It makes Link's quests and trials that much more hard-hitting, knowing that it leads to genuine, tangible changes to his mentality, and it just makes you wonder. Internally, there's a part of me that wants to constantly search for the ray of light here, just like Link does, and rationalize why this isn't actually all that sad, why this isn't a tragedy for the heroes of this land. But, in this case at least, I really think it is, and I don't think that I can spin this into something positive. But that's okay. It's not fun to think about, and it is a bit bizarre for a Nintendo flagship series to have this sort of sorrowful resonance. But that strange sadness is there throughout all of these games. It pervades them, and so it's appropriate that it's there until the end. All of these elements are truly what make the hero of time and Twilight, the savior of Hyrule, the role of Link, a true hero. One who has regrets, sadness, and pain. Because how genuine is it that these sorts of trials bring about this true torment? How could all of this possibly lead to pure happiness? It can't. Just as Ganondorf through sheer force of will meets with Link time and time again, so too does Link seem destined to lose something precious in this duel time and time again despite defeating him. In that way, Link is cursed, and it is a cycle to befall multiple Links, multiple heroes. I don't wish to overstate the negatives of this, and there are indeed quite a few beneficial things that result from this duty. Worlds are saved after all. But it is undoubtedly a burden, and to pretend otherwise is to misrepresent this great story. This hero of the Legend of Zelda series represents thankless sacrifice, the burden of duty, the tragedy of legacy, and the pain of loss. And that is a big part of why he resonates with me. Many thanks for watching.